Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be discussing African violets today with Louis Ratchford. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes while everybody gets logged in to go over our notes for anybody who might be new today. So welcome back if you have attended our classes regularly or before, and welcome to anybody who is new. So this is a webinar format. So if you have questions during the class, you're going to type your questions into that Q&A box. I'll be taking questions during the class and holding them until the end for Louis. Louis, I forgot to ask you if this class is going to go the full hour and then we'll do Q&A today.
Yes, it's probably going to go
Okay.
a full hour.
All right. So just so that everybody knows, Louis usually goes for the full hour, then we'll take questions following that. If you need to leave, please feel free to send your question to me and we'll be recording the class. So you can always jump off the call, come back, check the recording later, or you can follow up with us after class and ask any questions that you don't get answered. We will be following up tomorrow with an email that will have a link to the recording for anybody who has to leave early. I think that's it on my end. If you guys have any questions about like tech issues or anything, please feel free to let me know. I'm happy to help. The chat is open for you, and I'm going to go ahead and let Louis get started. Quickly though, because I forgot, Louis is based at our Fair Oaks location. He works in our greenhouse. He also works out in our trees and shrubs department and covers a variety of topics. So anybody who wants to stop by and see Louis, stop by the Fair Oaks store.
Okay, thank you, Sally.
You're
For
welcome.
one thing, I'm always here except for Fridays and Saturdays. So if you do have any questions about the African violets at all, you can always just give me a call here in Merrifield. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Louis, and today we're going to talk about African violets. And I have to go to share. I have to go here. Oh, share. Okay. So I finally got here. So today we're going to talk about African violets. And the preview of it, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of African violets. I'm going to tell you the total care of how to make your African violets awesome. The African violet problems that you can run into. We're going to talk briefly on propagation. We're also going to talk about putting them into terrariums. And then the best part of it, we're going to learn about all the different types of personalities. So African violets are native to the country of Tanzania. They were discovered in 1892 by Baron Walter van St. Paul. And he was a German guy, and he sent some back to his father. And that's how it actually got its name, St. Paula. They got it from the person who discovered them. So there is a very, very small area in Tanzania where these actual plants do occur. And as you can look at the photographs, they literally are on different crevices among rocks. They're in deep shade, highly humid. But the neat thing about them is they're usually under a sheltered area so that their crown doesn't get wet. And their leaves don't like to get wet either. So we'll go into detail about that. So they were brought into the United States in 1894, and they were too cold, and a lot of them didn't survive. And they also got the reputation of being a very hard plant to grow. We'll find out later that that's not the case anymore. Back in 1938 is when the fluorescent light started to become popular, and African violets love it under grow light. So that actually was one of the big things that really put them into one of the more popular plants. Today, African violets are considered one of the most popular houseplants in the world. That's what some people say. So some of the interesting facts about them is they're actually not a violet at all. They just look like it. There's over 16,000 different varieties that are registered as a variety. there's probably close to over 20,000 different varieties of them, but not all of them are registered. They are considered endangered in their natural habitat. And African violets symbolize devotion, commitment, and faithfulness. All flowers have a certain type of symbolism to them, and that's where the African violets are known for. One of the most interesting things that I thought about was how African violets and dogs have a lot in common. And what I mean by that is way back when we were hunters and gatherers, we literally would make a fire and dogs start to appear, and we started to feed them. And we also noticed that anytime something alarming, like a bear or something at all, they literally would warn us. So we became very intertwined with each other. And today there's dogs on every single continent in the world. There are hundreds and hundreds of different types of dogs. And literally, with them tagging on to humans and having a relationship, their population just burst into higher numbers. With African violets, the same thing. As I mentioned before, they come from a very, very small area in Africa and Tanzania, where they're actually almost extinct now. Since they hooked up with the human beings, you can find them on all 7 continents, and you can all the different types of them. Well, basically now they're not endangered because of the humans. So there is this little bond between humans and African violets, just like there is between humans and dogs. So now let's talk a little bit about how to take care of your African violets and how to make them thrive. As you see that photograph right there to the right of it is unbelievable. There's so many different varieties with incredible color with the flowers, but also a lot of really neat variegation going on as well. So let's talk a little bit about the light of an African violet. So they like bright, bright light. East-facing window, north-facing window. You can have south or west-facing, but you cannot have them in any direct sunlight. If they are in any kind of direct sunlight, then literally their leaves will burn up. The right amount of light is very important in making sure that they bloom. That's the key that you want with them, is for them to bloom. Having consistent light is extremely important. They can be grown underneath plant lights, having 12, 13 hours of daylight, and then making sure that they have the darkness as well. So light-wise, the brightest light possible would be fine. Just make sure that they don't get in any indirect or any full sun. I can run into a problem with that. When it comes to watering, they like moist, but they don't like wet. What I mean by that is when you have a very light soil, the actual particles of the soil literally are moist, but there's a lot of air pockets in there as well. So they're not saturated. So those roots literally get moisture, but they're not sitting in saturated soil. One of the other things that's really important is that African violets, the middle where all the stems come out and all the flowers come out, that likes to remain dry. As I mentioned before, they usually grow underneath a covered area. So in doing so, their crowns really stay dry. The other thing too is that their leaves don't like to become wet. They like a lot of humidity, but they don't like their leaves being wet. And the reason why I said that twice is that it's very, very important. And there is such a small niche of areas in Tanzania where these things can exist. It's very, very specific as to what their needs are. And there's not very many places where those type of conditions actually exist. One of them is actually waterfalls. Underneath waterfall, basically very, very humid, but it never rains underneath them. and they're sheltered from the rain, and those are where they thrive. They do are on the crevices of rocks. So that's another thing about them not being wet, but actually being very, very airy. So that's the watering aspect of it. Make sure that you don't water them from the top, they water them from the bottom so that the soil actually will go up into the soil and not doing it from the top where that crown or those leaves can get wet. The soil itself, as I just mentioned, the best thing to do is get the African violet soil. It's very porous, and it's also very, very airy. Again, there's a lot of air pockets in there, but a lot of moisture. They also like to be slightly acidic. That's perfect for it. So I would definitely get an African violet specialized soil for when you transplant them. Fertilizing, again, the same sort of scenario. When you fertilize, I always think it's best to dilute the fertilizer, follow the directions, and fertilize them every time that you water them, but use a slightly watered down fertilizer. It's almost like us taking a vitamin. You get a little bit all the time instead of hitting it hard with the fertilizer and then waiting a month. I think it's best to fertilize just a little bit. That's what I do with all my house plants. Every once in a while, when I water, I always do a little bit of fertilizer. To get the African violets to bloom, it's best to go ahead and look at the actual numbers on the fertilizer and try to get one that has a really big middle number because that's the one that produces the flowers. And again, get a specialized African violet fertilizer as well. And then there's some helpful hints that I've done. I used to collect African violets, had about, I never even counted them. They're probably close to 50, 60 of them. And they were all underneath grow lights. And, so it was a lot of fun growing them because they actually are very easy to grow. You just don't want to overwater them, and you let them dry to a certain degree, and then make sure that you put them on a tray with some gravel, and then on top of that, put the water so that they're constantly getting that evaporation. One of the other things that I found was temperature. African violets do not like to be above in the 90s. We have a lot of African violets down there right now, but during the summertime, we probably won't carry them as much. And the reason why is because of the heat. They do not like to be in the 90s. They don't like drafts. They like plenty of air going around them. They don't like to be in an area, that basically doesn't have a lot of circulation. And the other thing, and this is me personally, don't use spigot water on them. I always think it's a good idea to use filtered water or, spring water or even distilled water. I think that works a lot better than using the water out of a spigot. So the secret of blooming, that's one of the main reasons why, we have African violets is because more so of the flower, more so than the foliage itself. During the nighttime, the actual plant produces this stuff that's called florigen hormone, and that literally helps them to flower. If they are in a bright light for too much period of time and not get that 8 hours of darkness, it would be pretty hard to make sure it blooms. So it's just as important to have the bright light on them, but make sure they have that 8 hours of darkness. The other thing is not enough light. So if you have them in a darker area, they literally won't be able to flower as well. The other one is temperature. As I mentioned to you, when it gets above 80 or 90, they probably won't flower very well for you. The other side of that is having them too cool. Having them in the 50s is probably not a good idea. They like the same type of temperature as most people. So, when you do these plants as house plants, they basically like the same type of temperatures as we do. like, 71, 72, even up 68, 66, up to, 75, even up to 80, that's perfect. But when it gets too hot or too cold, they don't like that. The other thing is the fertilizer. It's really important to make sure that you use the correct numbers. I have seen people use a regular type of houseplant fertilizer, and most of those have a very, very large first number, which produces a lot of leaves. The second number is the one that produces the flowers. So when you look at your fertilizer, make sure that first number is not too big, and make sure that you do have some of that second number in there, so that having it high to make sure they bloom. So let's talk a little bit about pot size. So African violets love to be root bound. They don't like a lot of soil in there. If you do put a lot of soil in there and that plant can't drink up a lot over a period of time, then they probably will rot. They do like to get a little bit on the dry side, moist but dry, if that makes any sense to you. As I mentioned before, moisture, but there's a lot of air pockets in there. There's a formula to it where you take the actual size of the pot, and then you take the size of the plant, and it should be literally between 1/3 to 1/2 the size of the plant. And again, it's one of those things where you can take the African violet out and then mess around with the root system, give it some refreshment, if you will, and then plop it right back into the same container again. Some of the real big African violets, I've seen African violets, and you're going to see a photograph of one. It literally is probably at least 12 to 15 inches from side to side of it. It's huge. In that case, you probably would want to use a little bit smaller than what the formula would save to you. Again, you can repot into the same pot. They do like to be root bound. They do like to have a lot of space in there for their roots and a little less for that. So there is a unique type of pot that is actually made for African violets. And this pot kind of mimics the natural environment where African violets grow. You literally take an indoor or an inside pot with no drain hole on it. The actual material is very porous, which means that water can travel through it at a very slow route, a very slow, way. And then the inside pot goes into it, and the outside pot holds water. So water goes in there. It goes in there very, very slowly. So it's constantly a little on the moist side, but it's slow enough so that it doesn't get saturated. That mimics the natural area between those rocks where they grow in Tanzania. So think about it. It's easy to use one of these guys. This is definitely one way to do it. Another way is taking a terracotta pot, putting it in as a smaller pot, then taking the bigger pot that is not terracotta, or you can use terracotta again. You can take moss and put moss around it. It makes it very attractive looking too, by the way. And then, so you have a place between the inside pot and the outside pot that's moss or water to a certain degree. But literally it can, you can take and water the moss around there. And that moss, again, is going to feed into the inside pot. But also that moss is great because it's constantly evaporating. So it's going to give it a very, very humid type of conditions. When I do African violets now, that's what I use. I use the 2-tier type pot. All my plants are in terracotta pots, and I really like them that way. So some of the problems with it, I should point out, I am not a really good problem solver when it comes to any plants, but we do have an excellent source downstairs. It's called our help desk or our plant clinic. And anytime you have any problem with any plant at all, I would suggest for you to come in and go over there and take advantage of them. Those guys know so much about problems with plants, and they'll be able to decipher what's wrong with it. But some of the basics for African violets, when the leaf starts to curl, it can mean two things. It can either mean it's too cold or there's too much sun. When they start to turn brown, and one thing it can mean is that the water on the leaves can make it turn brown. And with that, it's usually the actual droplet itself would turn brown. And then the place where the water wasn't, it still remains green. And the other thing is too much fertilizer is actually burning the plant. Yellow leaves can mean one thing is water shock. You want to make sure that the temperature of the water is literally about the same temperature as the room itself. You don't want to put really, really cold water on these plants. They will go into shock. And then the other thing is old age. As I mentioned before, they literally can live a very, very long time, but those leaves at the bottom can start to turn yellow and you just snip them off. And I'm going to go into detail about what to do when you have a very, very old type of African violet. And the other thing is the droopy type leaves on there. That's probably a really big sign that you're overwatering it. Be really careful with that because a lot of plants, when they start to droop, it means that they're dry. African violets, when they droop, make sure you put your finger in there. And if you think that you're underwatering them and that's why they're drooping, then make sure that you find that out because overwatering has the same kinds of symptoms on that. Some of the other things are the insects. We do have a microscope downstairs, so we can actually take a leaf of the African violet, look at it underneath a microscope, and you can see all sorts of different types of insects. And what amazes me, it looks like the National Geographic, is when you look at some of these things and you see them, just with your regular eye, they don't look that bad. But when you see them underneath a microscope, it is amazing how fierce and how unbelievable they are. So here's a couple of the problems that you do run into with African violets. The key to it is to keep your eye open and notice stuff on the leaf and notice underneath the leaf. Notice the health of the plant. The main thing about watering and also about the powdery mildew or any of this stuff, when it first happens, is the best time to treat it. And by visually looking at your plants on a daily or every couple of days to make sure nothing's bothered them is one of the best preventions you can have for African violets or actually for any plant. Indoor, outdoor, trees, shrub, perennials, looking at them, seeing what's going on with the plant is the best way to minimize the type of problems that you'll have. So there is a systemic that you can put in. I'm not a huge fan of systemics, especially for outdoors, but I'm fine with using systemics indoors. You don't have any bees or anything. So literally with a systemic, the systemic goes actually into the plant and it makes the plant poisonous to the insects. So the insects will eat and they actually die because it's poisonous. There's also 8, which is something that you can use as well. If you do use that, make sure you use it outside. It's very, very chemical. And if you can, use a, like a Q-tip with some kind of alcohol or something and dab the insects, it's a lot better than using all the chemical stuff, in my opinion. So, okay, so propagation. It's amazing. It's really easy to propagate African violets. One of the best and easiest way is to literally just take off a leaf and put it in water. What you can do is take foil, put it over the top of a glass or something, put a hole in it, take and put the African violet stem into the water and it will root for you and you can get a whole new plant in no time at all. and that is by far the easiest way to do it. Second easiest way is to go ahead and take that stem of that leaf and make a hole in dirt and then put it in there, and it should root to you as well. If you do that, I always suggest to take it and dab it in some water first, and then take some root hormone, which is a white powder, and take and roll the white powder over the wet stem so that the white powder adheres to it, and then literally take that and stick it in the ground. What that hormone does is it changes the cells of the stems from stem cells, if you will, to root cells. So they start to produce roots that way. The third way is by using some of the babies off of the main plant. African violets have one stem, it's one plant. They do have babies that come around them, and you can take one of those off and use that to restart from the mother plant. But it's a really fun hobby to do. I've never got to the point where I would ever do seeds and stuff, but I'm sure out there you could probably be able to do that as well. If you're that interested, you might want to get on the internet for that. I have done that with amaryllis, but I've never done it with the African violets. So here we go. So there was a lady that brought in an African violet. It has been in her family since the 1960s. It had a stem on it that actually went up. It looked like almost like a palm tree. And it literally wrapped around. It came back to the ground. It went back up again. They had some sticks in there to hold it up. So they had this very long stem with no leaves on it. And then at the very top or the end of the stem was the African violet with the leaves on it. And so I told her what I was going to do. I was going to go up to right below where the leaves start, and I was going to cut it off there. I was going to put it into some rooting hormone, and then I was going to literally take it and set it into a new pot, which is actually pretty small. I also took about 4 leaves, and I took the leaves and put them in water so that if something happened to that parent plant, then she could have 4 other new plants, which would be the second generation. I was pretty confident, but you just never know. So she started having breathing when I cut. She had to steady herself a little bit. I did do the whole thing in front of her, and I gave her the leaves and stuff, gave her my phone number. She did call me about a month later and said that the actual leaf ones have rooted, and she put them in very small pots. So the second generation is there. And she said the first one, actually, the mother plant was still doing fine. She said at one point it did wilt a little bit, but then it came back. I said, if it starts to wilt, go ahead and maybe take off a couple leaves at the bottom, and you can use more second generation, but get it to the point where it stabilizes. And she did. And we do keep in touch, and the actual mother plant is fine. So, I mean, I was a little nervous about it as well, especially when you have a plant that's so old like that. So, but that is what you do when you get some of these very, very old African violets, and it does work out pretty well in the long run. But I always suggest that you make sure that you take a couple of them off. So sentimental plant, you'll definitely have some of the second generation leaves rooting for you. Okay, so talking about mimicking a same type of environment as how they grow in the wild, African violets do extremely well in terrariums. They get a lot of humidity. They get very poor soil, so there's a lot of air in there. But the neat thing about it is literally it's almost maintenance free. At one point, it's going to get bigger, and you might have to, take it out if it gets too big. The good news is that they do have some dwarf varieties that stay relatively small. The other good thing about it too is that you can actually put in moss or put in some things that actually complement the African violet. Remember, terrariums cannot go in full sun. If they are in full sun, they will burn no matter what kind of terrarium that's closed is. They need bright light, but they can't take the direct light on them. They just heat up too much, and again, they'll probably die. So now let's have some fun. So African violets come in all sorts of different types. I mean, it's amazing to me the assortment of different types of African violets that are out there. So we're going to look at all the different types of personalities. So this is what I was talking about. This African violet here is about 16 inches across. And this is a normal type of African violets. When I was having my collection, I looked into there's a African Violet Society, and they have shows where you go in and they judge your African violets. So literally, this is probably one of those where he's worked on it for years to come, and basically has probably been in a show or something. The neat thing about them is you can get some very, very large ones like this. You can get the normal size, but again, there's also the dwarf varieties that stay relatively small. One of the other type of African violets, which I never even knew existed, but a customer gave me one, is a running African violet. And what I mean by that is you have the African violet, and then you have a stem that comes off of that, and then that stem moves over, and then a new African violet appears at the end of that stem and roots into the ground. I am trying to get Paul to order some of those, but we don't have them in right now, but they are amazing. I do have one on an area that is on a tray with gravel, and I have the mother plant, and it did send out 2 babies, and I have these little tiny terracotta pots where it rooted in, but it's still connected to the mother plant. African violets are just so much fun. So there's all sorts of different types of flowers on these. You have the single type flower. What I mean by single is that you literally have one layer of petal around the flower. There's also semi flowers. And what I mean by that, there is one layer, and then there's just a few of another layer, and then you get the doubles where you can get 5, 6, 7 different layers of petals on it. The other thing is the ones that are fluted and the ones that are frilled, and I'll go into that. There's ones that are stars, which means that they form a star. There's all sorts of different types of them. The assortment is unbelievable. There's the fluted ones there, and there's also the other type as well. The other thing is the color of them. When you look at some of these, they can get 4 or 5 different colors literally on one type of flower. There's some that are variegated, that the top right has that pink, and then it has the white around it. And then there's the one that has the lime green on the edges. And if you look at the middle bottom one, you have hints of pink within the petal as well. A lot of these African violets are what we call collectors. And what that means is that the African violet people who collect them, there's extremely specialized type of African violets. The good news is we just got a batch in probably within the last 2 weeks. And what we do is we go over with our phones and we find out the name of it, and we look at the name of it, and then we look it up, and the attributes are unbelievable as some of these flowers are. And then we also have just the regular ones that give you just the regular looking African violets. But there's tons and tons of different personalities on these. Here's some more of them. These are the ones I was talking about that are more the singles. Then again, you just have that one layer of the petals on it. The other neat thing is I literally take photographs and I go real close to them to take a photograph, and you get almost like this fluorescent, almost like sugary crystal type things on some of these. So if you look very careful, like at the top left and at the bottom middle, they almost look like they're sparkling. It's amazing that they can do that. You can see some of the sparkle on that one. I think this is Cabbage Patch. This is a beautiful African violet, and it has the fluffered edges on it. Okay, let's go into the different types of leaves. The leaves of the African violet, you can have the plain, you can have the oval type, the pointed one, the serrated one where the edge is all, with it looks like someone took a pair of scissors and sculptured it. There's a heart-shaped one. And this is some of them. And you can see the fine hairs on them. And there's one over there that just has a little tiny bit of variegation on it. What I love is the variegated ones. Even when the African violet is not in bloom, they literally make that plant look spectacular. And you also, with that, you get different types of variegation. The other one is the pink variegation. So even when it's not in bloom, it literally gives you a lot of interest. If you look inside of that, the actual stems itself are literally looking like they're a different color. But going back here, you get all sorts of different degree of the variegation on it. So one of the most interesting aspects of this is back in 1984, they took 25,000 seeds and they launched them into space for 6 years. And they used the African violets, which just amazed me that they decided to use that. I mentioned before, it's probably one of the most popular or the most popular houseplant in the world. And they wanted to test the anti-gravity and the cosmetic radiation that would have effect on their seeds. So after 6 years, they came back, they planted them up, and then they found all sorts of things that happened. One of the results was wavy and ruffled, scalloped, and rippled leaves. So the leaves themselves actually changed into all sorts of different types of shapes instead of just having that one big flat leaf. It was amazing. The other thing is some of the original African violets were very stiff. They wouldn't move. They weren't as flexible. They found that the durability of the foliage and the flexibility increased, meaning that it wasn't so rigid. And then the other big thing, which I can see on a lot of the African violets now, is that there's more than one flower on the stem. So the stem comes up, and it used to be that there's just one flower on it. Now they have multi-flowers on the one stem. And then the other thing that they found was there was an increase in size, so that the actual size of the African violet parent was smaller than the ones that actually went into space. So they increased in size. So it was amazing to me how all these attributes came from the experiment they did over those 6 years back in the 80s. So let's look at some of these fewer varieties of them. So, and these are the ones, as I mentioned before, these are the ones that literally are the collectors. These are not the cookie cutter types, but these are the ones that literally we have downstairs right now. One of them is called Harmony's Glacier. Harmony's Glacier is a multi-petaled one. It has a light color blue. If you ever look at glaciers, they do reflect a little bit of blue, and that sort of mimicked what they were trying to do with this particular African violet. The other neat thing about this is it does have that little bit of that lime in there, and they kept the leaves very, very dark, so they have a lot of contrast between the leaves and the flowers on this one. This one here is a dwarf variety and is very, very old. This one's called Rob's Gondoro. And I have actually seen this one. The flowers are really, really small on it, and it literally has the smaller leaves. And they're ribbed, meaning that the leaf itself goes up and down, so you can see a lot of texture on the leaf. This is not one plant. This is many plants. The mother plant is in there, probably in the middle. And then you have the surrounding plants around the side that literally started to grow as well. So this thing made this huge big mound of leaf, and then you have the flowers on the outskirts of it. It's unbelievable. This is the cabbage patch. The other thing about it is if you look at the variegation of the leaf itself, which is that color of like orangey yellow, and then you look at the buds. First of all, with the buds of it, it almost looks like a hand is holding on to it when you have almost like a star or something gripping it. And then you actually have the flower itself. The flower is the petals on it are extremely wavy. The inside of it is a little bit more dark than the outside is. So it's a massive amount of petals on that one. But the variegation and the actual buds themselves really do look great together. This one's called Jolly Sunburst. Look at the leaves on this one. It is amazing. It almost looks like waves. The actual flower itself is multi-stemmed, and it has a haze of yellow in the middle. And then as that yellow literally comes towards the end of the petals, it kind of fades away. This is probably one of the best ones. This one's called Buckeye Cranberry Sparkler. The actual flower itself looks like the light pink, the darker pink was dipped in so that the flower has real light pink along the middle of it. And then just around the edge of it is literally the darker, almost purplish pink color. The other neat thing about this one is the actual variegation. You do see a little bit of that pink haze coming out of that white, which actually almost looks like a reflection of the flower itself. Now we can get pretty big. And then we have the Altamira Evergrace. I literally love lime green no matter what. I think it's the Irish in me. Oh, and by the way, St. Patrick's Day is coming up, and we do have the oxalis here, the shamrocks. But the oxalis, I mean the lime green at the tips of these, there is some down there that literally all the tips of them are lime green looking. This is a semi, it's not a double, just a semi, meaning just a few of them overlap a little bit. And this one is another one. It's called Buckeye Seductress. And that variegation complements that flower perfectly. There's 3 colors in there. You have a double type of flower, which is white. It goes into a darker pink in the middle. But those leaves are unbelievable with that variegation. So back in the early 90s, I had my own, I guess I said it was about 30 different African violets. And it's a wonderful hobby. Back then, I was actually getting some from the mail. Some of them turned out okay. Some of them didn't. I had to send them back. But you can get all sorts of different ones here. but I had a IKEA shelf that had, it was a double that had one, two, three different shelves on it. So there were six altogether. And I literally set up trays with the actual gravel in it. I put the grow lights on the top. The grow lights came down. I always had water in there. So they got the perfect humidity. And they literally thrived. A lot of them bloomed pretty consistently. I did use a good type of fertilizer. I did have them all in terracotta pots, but a little bit of this terracotta was in a little bit of the water so that the actual terracotta pot was always moist so that it literally fed into the dirt itself. So here at Merrifield, we do have some. I took this photograph. I love hairy plants, and African violets are hairy plants. And then that's my seminar. I guess I talked a little quickly, so I will turn it over to Sally, and I think we will have some time to get some of the questions.
Yeah, we do. Everybody, please submit your questions. We're happy to stay for a few minutes after 1 o'clock as we had planned. But we'll see if we can get to all of your questions today. So please feel free to send those. Our first question, Louis, was can you talk a little bit about, actually, let me start with a quick one. You were talking about the fertilizer you use for African violets early in the presentation, and you said get one with a high number. Can you elaborate a little bit? Is that like the first, I know fertilizers have three numbers. Was that the first number, the middle number? Which, can you just elaborate some on that?
Yes. Okay. So when you look at the three numbers, the first number, and I forgot the names of all of them, but I think it's nitrogen is the first one. So the nitrogen literally produces a lot of leaves. A lot of houseplants are just leaves, they're not flowers. So when you're looking at houseplants, a lot of those fertilizers are going to have a larger number than the other two numbers. And what that does is it produces a lot of leaves, which, like for instance, this prayer plant. This is a regular prayer plant. It does flower, but that's not why you get it. You would use a number from that has a real big first number so that it produces a lot of leaves like this. So when you're looking at an African violet, you literally look at the three numbers. The first number should be a little bit smaller than the middle number, or just the same, or even a little bit lower, but you don't want that first number to be real big. You want the other two to kind of carry through. The middle number literally is the one that produces the flowers. So when you are looking and you want to produce flowers, that's one of the best ways to do it is with the fertilizer. But again, with the African violets, there's a couple things. Make sure they get enough light. Make sure you use the right fertilizer. And there's a lot of African violet specialized fertilizers there. And the third thing is making sure that they get that darkness so they can get that hormone that actually helps produce them as well.
Thank you.
The third one, literally the third number, is for all three of them. So
Okay. So second number higher. Question real quick. The varieties, I think you said the varieties you showed at the end, those are the ones that are at the greenhouse now at Fair Oaks?
yes.
Okay, yes.
So yeah, just make sure that you literally bring your phone. Some of them are in bloom, some of them aren't. But
So
you will
to
look at
know
them
the
and you will
name.
just be amazed. The ones that I showed you, with this PowerPoint, a lot of those are downstairs. They're very unique. They're not the ones like this. They have all sorts of different attributes on them.
Okay, great. Next question. We had a few questions on dividing and propagating, so I'll get into that. The first question was about dividing. How do you divide the African violets?
Okay, so if you take an African violet parent, you take it out of its pot. And what I would suggest is to make sure that's a little on the drier side. And you literally take a knife and go around and very carefully loosen it up and bring it up. So basically, you will have a root in the soil. And then you'll look around the side of the parent plant and you'll see a baby one. Take the knife and almost go in almost like a wedge and divide it from the other plant, from the parent plant, making sure that it does get some of its root system. It's a very tedious type of thing to do, but that is mainly one way to do it. I like the idea of having the mother and the parents together. It makes it for a really nice show, if you will. Remember that one that I showed you that had, it was a variegated or a very small one that had a lot of purple on it? Those were many of them. There were just not one African violet. If you do want to propagate, as I mentioned before, taking a leaf and sticking it in water is the way to do it. You almost want to make a wedge from the child, from the mother, and slowly bring it out and literally cut it off from the bottom. You want to do a few of them at a time. You don't want to go all the way around the plant and take them all out at once, because that mother plant would suffer from losing all of its root system.
Okay. Now for propagating, so if you're starting a new plant from a leaf, the first question was, how do you cut the leaf? And the second is, if you're going to propagate an African violet that way, how long are we talking before the plant's blooming? Is it a few months? Is it a few years? Is it a few decades? Like, what's the best, how do we set expectations for that?
Okay, so with any plant, meaning shrubs, perennials, anything, one of the nice thing about plants is it does teach you patience. So if you're going to take a African violet and you're going to propagate it by leaf, you want to take the leaf, you want to go all the way inside, and you want to take and cut it with your fingernails and get it as close to the thing as possible, close to the parent plant. So then you're going to have a leaf and you're going to have a stem on it. At that point, you already have your water ready. You already have your tin foil over the top, and you already have your hole made. And you literally take that leaf and you cut it again, and you make it a nice clean cut about this much further up on the stem. And then you take it right away and you stick it into the water. Within maybe 2 weeks, you will get roots. They grow relatively fast. Once they get the roots on them, you want to take a very, very small pot and you want to put a hole in the middle with your finger, and then you want to set that thing in there. Remember, those roots are very fragile, so you want to do it very carefully, and then you want to drizzle dirt around the top of it. Probably within a month, maybe a little bit longer, I don't know the time exactly, you're going to see new leaves forming at the base of that plant. At that point, you want to go and do the root thing again, move it out a little bit from that very, very small pot and see if there is roots running around the sides. If it is, then go ahead and move it into a bigger pot. But again, go very, very slightly into a bigger pot. At that point, you can probably start to fertilize it, put it out into more bright light, and over time, that will start to produce more leaves. And at some point, if you're doing everything right, it will flower. I don't know how long it takes for it to go from leaf to actually getting a flower on it. But the nice thing though with the leaf cuttings is that you get the mother plant. You get the same exact flower as you did on the original. It's all about taking care of it. It's all about fertilizing it properly. It's all about making sure you got the 8 hours of night and talking about the real bright, no moments. But again, it's just fun to start doing these. Start doing the African violets. As I mentioned to you, I really had a good time with that.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about repotting? The question is, how do you repot? What size container? When do you know that you need to repot? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So when you take a plant, African violet, you measure this distance, and then you take 1/3 or 1/2 of that, and that should be the top of the pot that you're going to plant it into. When you take one of these out, I wish I would have brought a knife with me. You slowly take it out and you look at it and you see if you have a lot of roots going around. If you have a ton of them, I don't mean just a few, but a lot of roots, then it's probably time to transplant it. Most African violets, and I can't stress this enough, they literally can be very, very root bound. They love that. They love to have a lot of roots. They don't like a lot of soil. I mean, I've seen African violets this big in a pot like this. I've seen African violets come in that are, 5, 6 years old. They've never been repotted. So again, if you do repot, most people literally probably will literally take it out, mess up those root systems a little bit, set it right back down in the same pot, and literally put some new freshened soil around it. If it's really root bound and you need to go a little bit bigger, then literally go in a little bit bigger, but we're talking a little bit bigger, not like this. You want to literally increase the size of the African violet into a bigger pot, but make sure you increase it very slowly. The other thing to do is to make sure at the bottom, if you're using one that has a drain hole in it, which I hope you do, I always take and put in either a stone and just put a piece of pebble on that, or what people are doing now is they're taking some kind of material and they're putting some material over that hole. And what that does is it stops all the soil from going through. And again, once you do that, make sure you fertilize it a little bit to get that root system into that new soil.
Okay.
One other thing, Sally, is if you want to, you can come in and I can show you how to do it. You can bring your African violet in. I'd be more than happy to show you, how to do it.
Oh yeah, I was actually thinking we offer a repotting service, so you can come in and we can show you how, or you can come in and we'll do it for you. You don't have to worry about it. Some people prefer that. All right, next question. Okay, the African violet pots, the special pots. Should water be allowed to sit inside the outside pot? So you have, okay, yes. Next question. Sorry, everybody. I'm trying to sort through these. We can go up to half an hour, so we'll get through as many as we can. My leaves on the outside of my violet are limp and the middle leaves seem fine. Apparently, I overwatered. Okay, so someone overwatered their plant. What do you do now that you've realized you've overwatered your plant? How do you save the plant?
Okay, so the first thing I would do is take it out of the pot and slowly take it out and put it onto newspaper. What newspaper does, it actually brings out the moisture and air will get around into that root system. So it will dry it out faster when it's literally in the air than when it's in a pot. So do that very carefully. So now you have it out onto newspaper. Second thing to do is to notice the roots. If there's any kind of smell or anything like that, then most likely it has root rot on it. And it's very little you can do with root rot. The second thing is what I would suggest is one or two of those healthier leaves, go ahead and take those off and get your second generation going. Again, I can't tell you how easy that is to do. What you can do, once it's dry, set it back in the pots, all the ones that seem a little wilted, and take all those off. So that literally after a while, if they don't start to come up and start to get firm and they're still wilted, just go ahead and take those off. And those are the older leaves anyway. The core of it, the middle of it is what you're looking at. And once that starts to grow and everything, then you're basically out of the root rot type stage. But take it out and put it on newspaper or put it on some kind of paper and let that air get around there to dry it out a lot quicker.
Okay. Next question. All right, some of these, okay, I'm going to go through this one, but this may be one we need to see in person. This person has 2 violets grown from a mother plant. So 3 of the same plant, like clones of each other. The 2 younger plants are growing like the mother plant used to grow. They have long stems, large leaves. The mother plant, that's the older plant, is more of a mounded growth pattern. So, do you know why over time the growth patterns of these plants would change? Is there any type of pruning that needs to be done to maintain their growth habit?
Okay, so you have the two children plants,
Yeah.
and they're looking good.
Yeah. And it sounds
Okay,
like
and then the mother plant. Tell me about that plant.
it just says it's a mounded, sort of a mound. It sounds like the growth patterns just changed and she wants it to have the longer stems and the large dark leaves like it used to have, but it's now gotten to be mounded kind
Okay.
of instead.
Yeah, so literally the older plant literally probably has the longer leaves on it. Remember, African violets, as they grow, they do become bigger and bigger and bigger. The smaller ones, so it literally is just an older plant. That's probably why those leaves are a lot bigger and a lot more lengthier.
Okay. Okay.
And
Okay.
again, I can't stress enough with that is to go
Okay, yeah,
ahead.
she's saying I think we may need to see a picture of these. Can you follow up? Hang on. I'm gonna send this person my email address and see if we can get some photos later.
Oh, perfect.
Um,
Yeah, if I get a visual on that, I can give them a call.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think a visual would be best.
I think we need one there. Uh at ngcemail.com. Okay, I'm gonna send my email to everybody because you guys are all welcome to email me any pictures or questions at any time. That's fine. I forward them to Louie and whoever's teaching the class. I do not try to answer them myself. Don't worry about that. Next question. Does the African violet always bloom if its light conditions are met? So, like, does it bloom year round or does it have certain times of year that it blooms or every other year? How
Okay,
does that work?
so just for me, actually growing them, if you give them the right conditions, they can bloom pretty consistently. They don't really need rest time. I mean, I found that with mine that I used to grow, literally I had them in the perfect conditions and they constantly were in bloom. Um,
Okay.
During the summertime, when it's hotter, they might stop blooming a little bit. In the wintertime, when the sun is weaker, they might stop blooming because the winter sun is not as intense. The summer sun is extremely intense. So again, it has to do with the light. I did African violets underneath a grow light, which was extremely controlled. It had exactly 13 hours of light and I think 11 hours of darkness. So it was very, very controlled, and I made sure that their environment was perfect, and they did continuously flower.
Okay. Okay. Next question. Can you review? Okay, we've have a few questions on the African violet pot. Can you show? Do we have an example of it up there?
Example of what?
The African violet pot, the two-layered pot. Do we
I
have one?
don't have one with me now.
Bummer.
I should have brought
Okay.
one up.
The question is, can you review the inner outer pot suggestions and the watering instructions for that pot? There was
Definitely.
another question asking if you have a hole in the bottom of the pot or not. I'm guessing is there no hole in the bottom of the African violet pot that's the specialty pot? Otherwise, we always say have a hole in the pot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the inner pot is a pot with no drain hole in it.
Yeah. Okay.
The material is porous, meaning water will go through it, but it goes through it at a very slow rate. So literally, when you set that pot into water, which the outer pot is full of water, what happens is the inner pot, it almost sweats. It gets these little beads on the side. It doesn't rush in.
Hmm.
It's just little beads. The little beads on the inside of that pot actually start to feed the soil, and the soil absorbs them. The soil literally is African violet soil, so it's very porous, meaning that it doesn't saturate it. There's a lot of air in there as well. So it keeps it moist, but it does not keep it wet. So literally what happens is that you plant it in, you do all the instructions and all that. of, the size that you need or whatever. Then you put in your non-spigot water into the outer thing. Then you set the inner pot into it. And what I would suggest too is in doing so, make sure that, actually it'll be fine. And then all of a sudden, what will happen is the water from the outside pot will start to filtrate inside. Now,
Okay.
the other thing I should mention is on that outer pot, just take a few little drops of fertilizer and put that in there so that that fertilizer literally will fertilize the plant small all the time.
Okay. And just to be clear, that's no the plants with if you're potting in a pot that's not the specialty African violet pot that has the porous part, we always recommend you having a drainage hole. Like if you put an African violet in a normal pot.
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear about that. Okay.
So let's go a little bit further on that, which is my style, is you can take a terracotta pot with a hole in it, and then you can take another terracotta pot that's this much bigger, and you literally can take that and put moss in the outer pot and then water the moss around it. What that does is it does the evaporation that goes up and hits the leaf. It also
For humidity.
the terracotta so that it literally acts like one of the African violet pots to a small degree. You still have to water it. You still have to take it out and put it into a dish of water. But in the long term, it's getting all that humidity that it needs.
Okay.
The African violet pot does not do that.
Okay. And you can keep water in the outer pot at all times.
In the African violet, yes.
Yes. Okay. All right, moving on. Are you familiar with this may be a plant clinic question. Please let me know what is the white sugary substance I see on the bottom of the plant that kills my African violet. Do you know what that is, or should we do a referral to plant clinic for that?
I can speculate, but without seeing it or anything, I have no idea.
Okay.
One thing too is that spigot water has all sorts of stuff in it, and the reason why I know that is I had water and I had a heating fan going over it to give me some humidity during the wintertime. And what I found is there was a ton of white stuff along the edge of that. Then I did research and found out that there's a lot of stuff within our water, a lot of particles and everything. And thank God for me, I use filtered water and I use water in jugs, the spring water and stuff like that for my plants. If you literally take something like this and you put it into the spigot water and it never goes through, all the salts and everything will build up. So what I would suggest is to make sure that you bring a sample of that in and ask her they'll know right away. We can't do it without seeing it.
Okay. Yeah. So please feel free to send me an email. I can share with our colleague David Yost, who leads our plant clinic, and he can get back to you on that, or you're welcome always to bring it in or call us. Next question. We only have a few left. If you put a parent, okay, so this person has a parent plant and baby plants in one pot. How do you determine the size of the pot needed from if you have multiple plants in one pot?
Okay, so you're taking a parent plant. You've already separated the child
babies
from the mother, and now you're going to put them together?
Yeah, in one pot.
Okay. What I would suggest is take the parent plant, when you're looking at it, take a wedge of the root system out, stick the baby plant in that wedge, put a little bit of dirt around it, and then put it into the same pot as it was originally the parent plant was in. See how it takes, because it's going to now be starting to grow within, the parent plant root system, and then it's going to get established over time. Again, I can't stress enough, African violets love to be root bound. At some point, it's going to start, the baby's going to start going. If you do think that there's a need to put it into a bigger pot, then go ahead and do so, but do it very small amount of distance between the original pot and the bigger pot. You want to go very, very slowly with those. So take the mother plant out, go ahead and take a knife, make a wedge and almost like a pizza wedge. Take that piece out, take the baby, stick it into the wedge, and then put some dirt around that wedge and then put it back in the original pot until it roots up. And then if you need to go into a bigger pot, but make sure it's slightly bigger.
Okay. Next question. I've read that to keep a violet healthy, the lower leaves and stems should be pinched off monthly. Do you recommend doing that?
Okay, say that again.
Should you pinch off the lower leaves and stems of the African violet every month?
No, you should only take off the leaves of an African violet if those leaves are turning yellow, if they're look sick. If they're a healthy leaf, then just leave it alone.
Okay.
Remember that big picture I told you of that 16-inch African violet? Literally, that's how big it is. And that thing, I mean, if they would have pinched it off, it would never have got to that size. So yeah, if any leaf on any house plant starts to look wilted and it doesn't snap out of it, if it starts to turn yellow, if it has some kind of physical problem with it, like a brown spot on it or something like that, go to where it originates from and just cut it off. You always want real healthy looking leaves on your African violet or any type of house plant.
Okay. Okay. Um, let's see here. Okay, you mentioned if you check the African violet for repotting and it doesn't need a new pot yet, it's a good idea to go ahead and just give it some fresh soil. Is that correct? Just refresh the soil every
Yeah, I
now
mean,
and
you
then?
can. I mean, every once in a while, and right now in the springtime is always a good idea if you want to do any kind of repotting. The sun is getting warmer, the plants are starting to grow. It's a healthy growth. If you do think that have not repotted your African violet in a year or two, maybe 3 years, you can literally take it up, mess that root system a little bit, make sure the bottom. You might want to clean the pot, put in some soapy water, clean it all out and everything, and then just repot it back into the same pot.
Okay, okay. Um, should we be using distilled water or spring water? Does that matter? Or is it just that you don't want the tap water that's full of all the
Okay,
minerals?
yeah, so filtered water,
Okay,
spring water, distilled water, anything, but I'm not a big fan of spigot water on my plants. I don't drink spigot water, and my plants don't, none of my plants get spigot water.
okay,
A lot of people think that if you take spigot water and you let the chlorine come out, that it's fine after that. There's all sorts of other stuff in there. I mean, I know that, Fairfax County we have good water compared to a lot of places, but I like to spoil my plants.
yeah.
So I like to give them quality water. I mean, they're not out getting rainwater. So I kind of mimic, what they would do if they were outside.
Okay, okay. Next question. These are our last two. Can African violets get leggy?
So yes, is that yes. So over time, and we're talking years, what will happen, and I mentioned this, is that literally the African violets will lose their bottom leaves, and they literally look like a palm tree that comes up, and I call that legginess. And in doing so, is that you literally can take and cut the tip of that off, so you have the green part, and then you have the legginess, and you do away with the legginess. You take a couple leaves off for your second generation, just in case it doesn't adhere. You take the top of the palm tree and you dip it in non-spigot water. You take some root hormone, which is a yellow or white powder. It sticks onto that source. You stick it back into soil. It should root for you. So
Okay,
yes, they can get leggy for sure.
Okay. All right. Last question. Um, how long should I let the neck get before repotting? Is it fine to take it out of the pot and just repot it a little bit deeper without cutting the neck itself?
Okay, so again, can you repeat that to me?
Okay, so how long should I let the neck, like the neck of the plant, I guess that thick stem, how long should I let it get before repotting? Is it fine to just take it out of the pot and repot it deeper?
That's a really good question. I wish my boss was here. I always like to know the answer. I don't want to guess. And for that one, um, that person literally can go ahead today. I'll be here until 7 o'clock. My boss will be here. Plant clinic people will be here. I don't know the answer to that. I'm afraid if they are getting water from the bottom from the roots, then there's no need for it to root out. So it's not needed and it might rot. I have no idea. My name is Louis. I'm here until 7 today. Give me a call. You'll be the applicant Violet. Um, one of the best questions I've ever heard, person, and I can find the answer out for you. I just don't know. I don't
Okay.
know that one.
Thanks, Louis. All right, we have one more question and I can address part of it. You may be able to address the other. What is the
Okay.
cost of your plant clinic and repotting services? So our plant clinic for consultations is free. So you can come in and ask questions and we'll help you guys out. That's complimentary. We love to do that for you guys. The potting does have a fee, but I don't know the
Yeah. So
cost
the
off the
the
top of my
planting
head.
the planting fee is it's for every 2 inch. Yeah, for every inch it's $2. So if you have a 4 inch pot, it would be $8. And what
Okay.
that includes is for us to take the plant out, we refresh the soil, we get the new pot, which you'll have to buy or you bring one in. We do put the material at the bottom. We use quality potting soil. We have succulent soil down there. We have African violet soil. We have all the different soils. We do. This does not include orchids, by the way. Orchids is a different formula. And then literally we'll plant it in there and we also fertilize it for you as well.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, but our plant clinic is the service for you can bring a plant in. We're not going to charge you to look at it. They'll put it under a microscope, whatever you need, look at photos. We're happy to help you with that, free of charge. Um, Alrighty. One more potting question. That's fine. This is great. A lot of people don't know we offer this service, and it's a great service. Can you repot into a nursery pot as part of the potting? So I think you pick your pot, right? So we would charge if you want a new pot, then we pot into a pot that you purchase from us, or you can bring in a pot.
Yeah. So with the repotting, you literally the $2 an inch is just for us to repot.
Yeah,
Either we can go pick out a pot for you that you have to pay for, or you can bring a new pot in. But keep in mind, for most houseplants, and I'm a big believer in this, you want to go up very slowly.
hmm,
One of the other things too, a lot of people have their favorite pots, but the pot
yeah,
might be too big. You can take, this is called a nursery pot, plastic.
hmm,
We have them for like cents and like
yeah,
$1, $2. You can
yeah,
literally put it into that pot. We can do it for you. And
yeah,
then you take that and put it into the other pot, and then you can put moss or something around the top to look like it's planted in that
yeah.
pot.
Yeah, so the answer to can you repot into a nursery pot is yes, you can. Anything you want. You can bring them in or you can purchase a pot. Because a lot of people have family and that was something that was a family heirloom or just a pot they like and they want to repot into that. So
Right.
all right. Well, that's all of our questions, Louie. Thank you so
Well,
much.
that was a lot of
Um,
questions. I love that.
I know, I love it
Okay,
too.
just keep in mind that that lady, I'm going to go down right now and talk to him. So I will have an answer for the lady that wants to know about the leggy plant, if it's okay to make it deeper into the pot. I will find
Yeah,
that out. I was
perfect.
hoping
Well,
that
I
I was
can
going to
send that
learn
out
today.
by emails. Do you need to make an appointment for repotting plants?
You can always give us a call. In
Yeah,
most cases, we're able to do it on the spot, but like on a weekend or something like that when we're extremely busy. But we can always take it and say, hey, we'll have it done for you for the next day.
Yeah. Just call ahead if you need it at a specific time to make sure.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you can always drop it off if needed. And we don't have someone who can do it immediately. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Everybody, please feel free to go see Louie at the store or the plant clinic, whoever you need to visit. And you can always follow up by email. I will send out an email with a coupon, a link to the class recording. And Louie, if you want to send me the answer to that question, if you get it, or give it to Danny, if Danny's in the room, and he can send it to me, then I'll distribute it by email tomorrow. So,
Yeah,
alrighty, thank you so
I'm at
much.
the Fair Oaks location.
Perfect. Yeah, Louise at Fair Oaks. Talk to you later. Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.